I'm Grace Kupat, CEO and founder of ViaSkill. ViaSkill was built on a simple idea that most people do a lot of work, they do meaningful work, valuable work, but they don't know how to capture it. They can't show what matters. They don't always know what's next. And so we focus on things where how you can track your work, your everyday work, show it on demand, and grow with insights to help you understand what's next in your career. So this podcast is about the human side of careers, not the hype, not the shortcuts, and not just the idea of technology that replaces people. It's about real work turns into real opportunity. So today I'm really excited to be joined by Paula Nordoff. I hope I pronounced that right. She's been a career coach for more than 20 years, experiencing working with professionals across industries from managers, executives, helping people navigate change, define their value, and move forward with confidence. She's worked with large corporations, led executive teams, career programs, and coached hundreds of people through the transitions that go beyond the resumes with identity shifts and building confidence. And so with that, I'd like to introduce you to Paula, and I'm really glad you're here. So tell me a little bit about you and give our viewers some insights about who you are, Paula.
Sure. Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today, Grace, so thank you. I've actually been career coaching now for more than 30 years.
Oh, okay.
I've done it in private practice, and I've done it with career management firms, both in the United States, but also internationally. And I've found that to be a lot of fun because every society does things differently, right? And the way people get jobs, et cetera, is never the same, right?
Yeah, that's interesting.
And culturally, it depends, So
Yeah.
that's something that I've learned along the way, and I always try to keep that top of mind, when I'm engaging with a client.
Nice.
I took this path because I'd been in corporate for quite a long time, and frankly, I was just tired of it. I thought,
I get that.
I've done my time, and now I'm looking for something else. And so I took a coaching course for about 8 months, and I decided I would go with the career part of it, and I opened up my first shop to do it.
Congratulations on
and
that.
I've just been, thanks. Yeah. And I just so enjoy it. And I'm always so delighted when people make the shift, get hired, get a big raise because they negotiated well. I enjoy all those aspects.
That's really awesome. Yeah, I enjoyed working with you years ago, and it was such a remarkable impact on me, and really knowing what my value is and not being kind of pigeonholed into a corporate environment where they sort of tell you who you are. You kind of lose your identity in some of these corporate environments. So that was a huge impact.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, no, it was wonderful. I really appreciate that connection. So in terms of like the human reality of careers today, what do you find that people are most confused by or maybe frustrated by that you've come across, especially in recent years?
I would say there are a number of things, Grace. One of the things I see, with my clients and my clients tell me is the level of ghosting that's going on with job postings. And now now we're in an era of fake job postings, and it's tough to discern that. You have to look for little cues in the way things are worded, how they're described, to know, whether it's legit or not. And it's still it's not refined at all.
Right.
But I do think, I've had clients where the company's demanded 12 interviews, they get through the 11th interview, and then we've decided to go with someone else.
Right. Yeah, I've definitely experienced that. And you don't even get any feedback as to why. Nope. They're like, just kind of move on. Thank you very much.
Like, okay, we're done. Good luck.
Good luck. Yeah, nice to know you. Okay, bye. The career hiring is so chaotic and confusing. Where do you think professionals underestimate their own value, or do they? Like, is that something that's happening today? Or is it more of like that frustration of just, I can't find a job and I don't know why?
Yeah, like, why don't they call me back? I meet all the qualifications, et cetera. I think to that end, Grace, I think besides people being frustrated about being ghosted, et cetera, I think people, and sometimes are having doubts, right? I mean, if the company's in trouble that they work for, many people, of course, especially right now, are like, am I going to have a job?
Right. And do you feel
You know?
like, kind of just expanding on that, do you feel that today, especially with the advent of AI, I know we're going to talk about AI a little bit later,
Hmm.
with the advent of AI, is there a little more fear today as there was maybe 10 years ago? Are you seeing that kind of trend, or is it more like, do I need to upskill?
I think it depends on the person, frankly.
Mm,
Grace, I think people are learning all the time at the pace at which things are changing and technology is advancing, that it's important that they upskill, right? Maybe
right.
take a couple of certificate classes, dust
Right.
something off they've done before so that they can be seen as qualified and capable, but also desirable, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Oh,
But I,
absolutely.
but I think on the confidence front, I think it's coming from many places. I think one place is we're in difficult times right now
Right. We are.
for lots of reasons, and I think sometimes people are afraid. They're afraid of, am I competitive enough? Do I have enough skill sets? Am I going to be a culture fit? Really, because when an employer is looking at you, there's really two big buckets. One is, are you competent, and are you going to fit
Right. Right.
with our culture and our philosophy, et cetera?
Right. Yeah,
So
it
I
is kind
think
of
that's
interesting.
packing in. And I think people, many people now are seeing loved ones and friends being laid off. I think I just read in 2025, over 300,000 people have left federal government.
Oh my gosh. That is
Yeah,
huge.
that's a staggering number. And, it's all different circumstances, right? Some resigned, their departments got chopped, whatever it is. And, when you're in transition, it can feel like a pretty lonely place.
That
You're
is so true.
worried. You
Yeah.
feel like you're working hard to get your next job. Some days are better than others.
Right.
The not hearing back is difficult, but there are ways to navigate it if
All right.
people choose to do so.
Right.
The upskilling could be part of it. Many people I think are also experiencing,
Oh, can you hear me?
I've been in manufacturing for years and, I'm a PMP project manager. Maybe it's time to look somewhere else. Maybe I should look at a career change.
Right, exactly. And I think that's part of the challenge that a lot of people have, whether they're changing or pivoting or even coming out of college. It's hard to even know what that even looks like because titles change, technology changes, and so does those roles. And so a lot of people that I've experienced don't even know what that next title looks like or even is. And so just that knowledge base, I'm like, oh, there is, when UX UI design came out, I mean, it's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, but it didn't have a name. So as we started to get into the internet, okay, it has a name, and now that name kind of changed from UX UI designer to UX, developer, and then all these different names come out, and you're like, I didn't even realize that existed as a name, a title. So that's
Yeah, well,
interesting.
there are certainly, many of them.
Right.
I think people are also, often anxious. Confidence may be low. They're worried about family, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How will we keep this going?
Yes.
And I think in these times, it's especially important, that people don't hide. That they
Absolutely.
communicate and stay in touch with
Right.
kind of all the people in the universe, whatever the
Yeah.
relationship. And
Absolutely. I think
and
that's
part
so
of that is
important.
just staying in touch, right? Which
Right.
many of us struggle to do. But
Exactly.
sometimes through those conversations, a door opens.
Right.
About 70% of people in the end get their jobs through human connection.
Amazing. That's an amazing number. Wow. I had
And
no idea.
should you apply to jobs? Well, there's no reason not to. But be
Right.
really specific and really thoughtful. Don't
Right.
turn them out for the heck of it. When you look
Exactly.
at the job description, really study it because you're going to
Absolutely.
see patterns of needs that
Hmm.
likely you fit into. And you want to be sure that your resume and your LinkedIn also reflect some of that. But
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
staying in touch with people is one of the best things you can do for yourself. I think, especially if you're in transition, you need to schedule time off,
Right.
and
Take some
not
time to
try to be at it
reflect.
5 or 6, hours a day, every day, like set a schedule.
That's a
I'm
good
going to
idea.
work on this on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, as an
That's
example.
exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that we built within ViaSkill, and just for context, why we even built that was because of that direction that a lot of people lack. as far as like writing things down or taking tally of their skills or taking tally of the career opportunities and talents. And so in my experience before we built ViaSkill was like I don't really know where to look. Where did I put all of my work? Or, God forbid you get laid off, now all your work is gone back in the company systems and now you have to use your memory. Can you tell me, in terms of like technologies that are out there, do you have an opinion of why maybe resumes and LinkedIn's do they really capture the real contributions, or do you feel that a lot of people fail to create the customization for a particular job that they're applying for? Because I think for us in our experiences, we've had similar challenges, but I'd kind of like to hear it from your perspective.
Sure. I think that a lot of people set up their LinkedIn profile often because they're directed to do so. I often see them not kept up. I see them stagnant. And you hit on a really important point. Your LinkedIn profile is pretty easy to customize.
Right.
Trade words out, put words back in. And it takes 2 minutes, right?
Mhm.
So if you got an application and you've been told you're going to get an interview, it wouldn't hurt to go dust off your LinkedIn and probably
Right.
put in some keywords that are related to the job that you're going for. Because, all of these systems are using scanners still, ATS, which is, I think, going
Hmm.
to quickly be displaced, right,
Right.
by whatever version of, AI.
Yes.
And I think people they're so worried about the resume, which of course is critical. We have to do it.
Right.
I wish they'd go away, but they're not going away yet.
Yeah, that would be.
And people can customize their resumes pretty quickly if they develop a master resume, and then
Right.
they trade in and out what's going to be relevant to the position and the skills they have and the accomplishments.
Absolutely. I think that's great. And in terms of like, do you feel that people get lost or they rely on like their memory? How do people actually keep track of their work or to actually even update their resumes? And so one of the things that I've experienced is like some people just forget. So I can remember what I did yesterday, but then when it comes to a job description and then a related work, I really have to think in my head and go back even a few years to even know like I know I did that. Like what did I do that with? Is that like a challenge that people actually experience?
So I think pretty frequently, particularly in situations where um, your job's been eliminated, right?
Right,
Because
right,
that's a pretty quick transition, and you almost immediately lose your technology, your company laptop, and that kind of thing. And it's something I try to work with clients on all the time. It's, every at least 3 months, just sit down and document your wins. You can
right,
do it in Word, you can do it on a pad of paper, because it becomes unretrievable. Same
right,
with your performance reviews, right? I always encourage clients, get those performance reviews down into your personal computer so that you have
right.
them.
So do you have them? Refer back to them. It's
Yeah, and and that makes just everything a whole lot easier.
right,
But I do think that I'm not sure it's forgetting. I think it's busyness.
right.
I think
Yeah.
people generally have a lot on their plate for a wide variety of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even if they think about it, it feels like one more thing to do, even if it may only take 5 minutes.
Right.
But then, the unfortunate side then is they lose that info.
Right. And
And
and he typically ends up panicking around the time where somebody says, oh, hey, I have an opportunity. Can you send me your resume? And they spend the next couple hours or a day or so updating their resume, which I've been there. In terms of how like explaining their work, or like let's say they get past the resume part and they get past all of that and now they're in the interviews, are you finding that kind of speak to that, like how are people actually doing in their interviews these days? Are they going in with a lot of confidence? I guess it depends on their skill level, but even the most tenured tend to have some challenges, especially if they've been waiting for a while to get a role.
yeah, and that can go from a top executive to an administrator. It's
Right.
a wide field. Part of my work is in interview preparation and always has been. I think, you often get asked pretty standard questions, often from HR.
Right.
Sometimes the hiring manager detours from that. Um, the tell me about yourself, why do
Right.
you want to work at our company? And then you're almost always asked examples. Tell me about a time when. How did you handle this? Tell me about a failure. Tell me about your proudest accomplishment. Those kinds of things. The list can go on and on.
Right.
I think, I really work with my clients because now almost all this is done online. People
Right.
do
Yeah.
get face-to-face interviews. It's often at the very last step
Right.
when you kind
Interesting.
of probably are going to get the job, but you have to have the last check mark,
Right.
completed. And I think people often overtell. I think they
Oh,
give too much
that's
information because
mm-hmm.
if you think about your audience listener who's also a very busy person,
Right.
you should be able to even tell an example story in a couple of minutes.
Right.
Because the longer you go, the more the receiver is usually frustrated or doesn't feel they're getting a straight answer.
That's interesting. I know I've been told in the past to explain yourself using the star example
Mm-hmm.
or something
Mm-hmm.
along those lines. Is that something that you recommend? Kind of keeping it brief, but still kind of following with that situational, forget what it is.
Yeah, no, I do because I think it's important. I think when you're being asked to give an example, whatever the example might be, I think it's really important to start with the result.
Hmm.
What did I do? What was the
Right.
outcome? What impact did I have? And then it's the what was the issue?
Right.
And then it's the how I did it.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
And I think that's powerful. I think it's succinct. And you are trying to let the user or the HR person or whoever know, like I've got the goods.
Right. Yeah. We did a poll and conducted it. I think one of the biggest challenges that people have is that they don't want to talk about themselves as much. They feel a
Hmm.
little egotistical. And it was a remarkable amount of people who said that and had that fear. Is that something that you've come across where people are almost too afraid to say too much and so they start rambling, or they just don't, they climb up and they don't say anything? In either case, it's not good.
And there is a spectrum on that.
Right.
There are people who overtalk, and there's people that are almost stingy with their answer, right? And I think that's part of what you're saying,
Hmm.
right? Like, okay, I'm just going to tell them and wait for the next question, which is not a bad thing.
Right.
But I think, it's also important to, really engage with whoever's on the other side. Keep the eye contact, smile, nod your head, and don't look like you're frozen, right? And when people are nervous, they often freeze, right?
Right.
They're kind of rigid and, because they're nervous.
Yeah, that's interesting. That is really interesting. Yeah, 'cause I didn't even think about the whole like dynamic or the language of your body language. I know I've heard of it and I just do it naturally, but giving that and hearing it is really important, I think, for people to realize that it's not just the words coming out of your mouth. That's
Yeah, because you're hopefully trying to build a relationship
right.
and
Yeah.
let the person know that you're truly interested, that you're truly qualified. Be curious. Any applicant needs to also think through ahead of time, well, what questions am I like?
Right. I think that's a really important point too. I know of one person that went in for an interview, not with me, but it's actually with a friend of mine, and they did no research into the company that they were interviewing with, and so he ended up interviewing with the VP of the company, the
Mhm.
vice president, and said, "Well, so what's your role?" I'm like, just say no to that. Just make sure you do your research and know who you're speaking with, because that's he didn't get the role in that one.
Yeah, and and sometimes there's just no chemistry, right? You can be
Right.
well prepared and all of that, but as you go through the interview process, red flags come up, or you start feeling uncomfortable, or you're not sure where
Right.
the company's going, and that's expected, and that can and will happen.
Definitely. I think I recall one interview I went in for. The person I was interviewing with just got this new TV, and so he put the TV up on the wall and started watching a football game while we were having an interview. And at the end of the interview, it's like, okay, so when do you want to come back? Walked out of there going, no, if you can't pay any attention to me while I'm while I'm interviewing, I can't imagine what it would be like working here. So it's you're almost like you're interviewing them at the same time, even though as much as you want the role, you're kind of doing that same. They're interviewing you, you're interviewing them at the same time. That culture
Well,
fit.
and our technology has kind of become, an enabler, and you know, we're on our phones all the time
Right.
or whatever device. I hear about that from clients more and more that, it gets very frustrating when you're hauled into a meeting of, 6,
Oh,
8, 10 people, and 9 of them can't take their eyes off the phone. And it's supposed to be a discussion meeting or a problem solving meeting or whatever the agenda is. And I think that's going to be an ongoing challenge, but I think it's
Right.
also challenging for the participants when your leadership is doing it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think that's kind of goes back to the adage of, as you're a leader, just lead by example, and think that's kind of important.
I have to step away for 1 second,
Oh,
Grace.
of
Someone's
course.
at the
Yeah.
door. So just bear with me.
No worries.
Hi. Thank you, Grace. I
No
appreciate
worries
it.
at all. No worries.
The balance of working at home, right? That was somebody at the door. So.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I have sometimes my cat is at the door and she'll start screaming out there like she's dying.
Oh, yeah, that's a favorite trick.
Right?
That's a
You're just like
favorite trick.
that's all right. So let's go ahead and move on to the topic of AI and careers today. And it's kind of remarkable the shift between what we've seen to even just 5, 10 years ago and AI and how it's impacted our careers. How have you seen AI changing the way that you career coach or even just in job searching? What's your take on it and how has it changed even the way you've worked and how people are reacting to it?
Well, in a way, it's relatively new. It's changing at warp speed,
Right.
which is kind of hard to be prepared for. I mean, companies are already using AI in their employment recruitment
Right.
processes. They're using AI to look at resumes.
Hmm.
They're looking at AI in terms of their recruitment process systems, like how much more can they automate that?
Right.
How can they use the technology to screen thoroughly, as the applications are coming through. So I think it's going to continue to be a big factor. I had a client a couple of weeks ago who we had a meeting, I think the day after he had applied for something, and he applied and it looked like it went through, and then at the very end he got a question saying, do you want to participate in AI?
It's
And
like
it
an
was a little bit
interesting
stunning
question.
because he's like, well, what happens if I don't? Right? Like, is this, do they want me to do it so much that if I don't do it, they're not going to look at me? And it was just interesting. And I hadn't had that come up yet.
Right.
But I think that kind of thing is more and more. And I think there'll be screening elements that will be continue to be digitized,
Hmm.
and formalized in that manner, whether it's an assessment tool
Right.
or it's a case study or it's just some kind of general questionnaire that is probably more about the skill side.
Mm.
And I think a lot more of that's going to be AI.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's going to be things that kind of help streamline maybe that hiring process, but at the same time, it's stressful for the person looking for that role because they don't know exactly what's being said to
No,
them.
exactly. Yeah. And, I hadn't had that occur yet. And so he and I had quite a long talk about it. And
That's right. Oh,
he
wow.
decided, in the end, I think he decided not to do it. He was just going to leave
Oh,
the application the way he sent it in and not,
okay.
but I have had a fair number of clients that I'm working with that are, using it for cover letters,
Mm-hmm.
using it for resumes,
Right.
with, the caveats that one might expect.
Right. Right.
See them. Sometimes they share them with me because they want my feedback. And I often do see errors, not
Mm.
so much misspellings, but more context.
Okay. Yeah,
Like
that's
there's half of
interesting.
the sentence that's like in a paragraph where it just makes no sense, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I just think, like anything else, any other tool you're trying to use, I just think people need to be really thorough and make
Right.
sure, anything that they do with AI, they screen very carefully before they
Yeah.
send it.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah, I think that's really important. And even in our own platform, our platform is a little bit different than ChatGPT in the sense that it doesn't just take in a resume and then outputs a better resume based on the job description. We actually take in what people do every day. So, you put in your project that you do every day or your task that you do every day. And so when you do put in a job description, it actually will put out a resume that's geared based on your skill set. So it's not making things up, but outputs it for that job description. But at the same time, we always tell everybody, it's like, just check it, just make sure, because it's AI. It's, and it will make mistakes every once in a while. And so just don't rely on it just blindly. You want to go in and just double check it, make sure it's saying the right words, and to really represent you when you go into that, turn that in. You don't want to say you're working at a government place when you never had that clearance to
Right.
begin with.
Yeah, and you've raised a really good point about trying to synthesize these tasks because they're cumbersome
Right.
for the client.
Yeah,
Writing a resume is cumbersome,
it
right?
is. It is cumbersome.
Writing a bio is,
It's,
a pain. So I think the fact that many of these technologies are going to spur
mm-hmm.
those kinds of things becoming easier, but I still think you should always verify.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's super important to verify. I mean, it's the AI of today. It's when I look back, even just a year ago, I mean, it's just leaps and bounds. It's like one day it's totally different. Somebody said to me, "Oh, you're using RAG?" Well, no, that's old now. That was like a few months ago. I'm like, "Oh my goodness, we have to just check that out." Like, what are you serious? you know, you have to just keep on it. It's just amazing how quickly, the technology is just growing. But anyway, so what do you think can help people gain that clarity and make that momentum in terms of, like, in this world of AI? What can they do to help themselves out? Like, whether that's upskilling, whether that's using it to streamline their efforts in getting a role or getting a promotion. What do you typically recommend that they apply, that either the AI or even just traditional methods?
Yeah, so with the AI being relatively new, right, busting at the seams, but still relatively new,
Right.
I think it would be fairly easy for many clients to just set up a digital folder. And it can be very basic. It doesn't have to be fancy or detailed or highly graphic.
Right.
It can be a roadmap, it can be a chart that kind of reminds the client, what's the goal here?
Right. Yeah.
What's the goal of where I want to be? Where's the goal, or what's the goal about what's going to be my priority in my next job? How do I make sure, like you were touching on earlier, that I'm capturing my brilliance and that I can find it and that
Right.
I can use it and I can show it? I think those are
Yes.
all going to be very big things, shifting constantly. But I think
Absolutely.
it's very simple. You can do that kind of check in work, every 2 months, 3 months, whatever it was, like we talked about before. And
Right.
it could be any tool that the client would want to use, but it does have to be accessible, right?
Right.
Typically, when you look at, a job evaluation, right? After the evaluation, the event's over, right?
Right.
But you still would want to keep those accomplishments
Right.
for
Yeah,
that particular
exactly.
time period, and then make sure that you double secure them so you don't lose them, since they'd be, very hard to retrain and retrieve. And I think it's important to map those to LinkedIn, but not cut and paste and cover over.
Right. Yeah. You want to make sure it's catered and you go through it and just make it about you, really, and let people know what you've achieved. I know we talked a little bit about how people can go blindly use AI. Now, what happens, in your opinion, if somebody completely avoids it entirely?
Well, I think we're going to see a fair amount of that for a while. I think, even to many sophisticated people, it's scary. They don't really understand what goes up behind the scenes. They don't feel skilled in it.
Hmm.
It's kind of like being thrown at them, but they don't feel ready for it.
Right. Yeah.
And I think, people are, a lot of clients are at least experimenting,
Right.
not with just ChatGPT, but other, technologies, so that they can gain familiarity and they can save time and get a good quality product
Yes.
without a lot of personal effort, right?
Right.
Because you're
Yeah.
letting the machine do most of the talking, shall we say.
Right.
And I think it'll be challenging for people of many ages. I think the rapid pace is going to be challenging to keep up with.
Yes.
I think people will need to get coaching or adopt tools that are tutorial,
Hmm.
like this is how you set this up, this is how you da. And I think that that's just going to be never ending, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because with the ebb and flow of everything and the way things are moving and the speed of them, I think people are just going to be continually challenged, and that's not in any way negative. I just think that that's the rapid evolution
It
of
is.
how
Yeah.
the world's doing business,
I think so
and
too.
how we're all going to be doing business, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've seen some crazy AI out there that's associated with robotics. A little kind of iRobot scary, but it's like, okay, well, I guess that's the new world. I went to a Korean barbecue one time and there's this like cat looking machine thing that delivered the food to me. It's like, what
Mm.
is this? And then, it plays beautiful little music as it kind of goes around delivering food. You just hope it doesn't run over a child or something while it's delivering the food. But, it's just such an evolution. You just see new things, new technologies. So before we wrap it up, I wanted to always end in a question. So for those listening right now or who will be listening to this, who feel stuck, uncertain, or quietly thinking about change, what is the one piece of advice or perspective or reminder that you want to leave them with in today's career landscape?
That's a great question. I think there's a few things, and I'll be brief. I think one of them is, we all have power, we all have knowledge, we all have skills, we all have life's ups and downs. But in the end, the vast majority of the people I work are very competent, very responsible, want to do the best job possible under the circumstances, whatever they might be in the moment. And I think it's important for people to honor themselves and what they've done so far and really have a sit down about what they want.
I think that's really important. Definitely knowing what you want and just analyzing what that even looks like. Sometimes you just don't know.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's a great um, ending
But
part.
it can start a thought process, it can start a research process, it
Yeah.
also can start a human process where, you could have ideas about your next career move and, kick them around with people you know and care about because they see you
Perfect.
differently than you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably an important thing. I think when I started my career, someone noticed that I had some skills in design, who's happens to be my husband who decided, who noticed that. So I ended up getting into design and obviously technology at the end. And it is those people that you're close with that can really help you out and kind of give you some guidance.
Well, they care about you, but in a way they're objective,
They are,
right?
yes, exactly.
And they can offer gentle feedback or they could let you know they think you could be doing something different or, whatever the conversation might be. But I think it's so important because we all need a mirror from time to time.
Right. Yeah, we
And
do.
sometimes we look in the mirror and we don't see things that other people see about us. And the way that we can unearth that is to engage with them.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point, actually. Really great point. So before we go, I'd love for you to share, what it is that you're working on right now or who would be able to get a hold of you if they wanted to get a hold of you. I know that you do career coaching and, you help people out and changing their trajectory. So if you could share, how people might be able to reach you and just kind of close on that.
Yeah, well, I'd be happy to. I am actually working for a career management company at the moment, so I'm not a free agent. But I'm happy to engage with people anytime about questions or ideas or concerns or could I do this differently or am I missing something here? Those conversations are fine with me.
Perfect. That's awesome. And if they wanted to actually work with you through that agency, is it LinkedIn a good place for them to reach out and inquire more about that?
They can reach out on LinkedIn for sure, but that's not the way the particular model I work in works.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'd be happy to talk to them about it.
Okay.
That wouldn't be a problem. But the model that I'm in now is quite a bit different than
Okay.
the model I was in with my prior company. But
Awesome.
I
Okay.
love career coaching. I love helping people. So if they want to have a chat with me, I'm open to do it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate your time. It's been really enlightening. What's that you say it? For me anyway. And again, connecting up. So that's been just a fabulous conversation. And I hope our viewers will actually appreciate all of the input that you've given us. Really appreciate your time on this.
Well, I thank you so much. And again, I thank you for the opportunity and I wish you a great holiday
Thank you. You
and a
too.
good new year.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Okay, take care.